Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Obviously, because there's a quiz, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can go through the lecture. Okay, so just make sure this is showing up. Cool. So we're going to go over some more drought monitoring fires, but using the satellite information. So that'll tie into what we're working on. So I just want to kind of go over screen. Go over this. We have a bunch of different satellites out there, depending on who owns it, meaning which country, what it does, etc. So we have Jason 3 that looks through lenses, mostly looking for reservoirs or water. We have GPM, which is generally used for precipitation, Grace Faux, which is groundwater, and then the SMAP, which is used for upper soil layers. And the differences have everything to do with the reflection using the remote sensing. So if you're interested in anything, there's sources at the bottom of these I'll make sure these are posted. So what's GPM? Well, it's the Global Precipitation Management Satellite. It's a joint satellite between NASA and the Japanese Aerospace Exploration. It looks and shows precipitation every 3 hours, which is pretty awesome. So we use it with weather forecasting, and it helps us kind of see like how much is going to rain or snow. Excuse me. All around the world. Excuse me. The soil moisture active passive measures the amount of liquid that's in the top 5 centimeters of soil. You're like, whoa, how do we do that? And they use a microwave based radar. Yes, microwaves go through things. So, just as thought, the effects of the low soil moisture, as you know, causes problems for vegetation. And this allows us to use the satellite imagery from MODIS, or the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, and that's in NASA's Terra and Aqua satellites. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. Are you going to have to know all these different satellite names? No, but you should know what SMAP is and GPM, or have a general idea like what we look for. When we use these things together, you can see water availability as well as use, and then soil moisture, which helps us figure out where farmers can grow food. Okay. Excuse me, the Terra Modis and SMAP. We use these to kind of look at storm areas before and after rain. Sorry, excuse me. You can look at the difference here in the year. So 2021, the drought conditions had been pretty gnarly up here in Yellowstone. And then in 2022, park entrances had to close because there was so much moisture. And look, if there's like snow, tons of rain, so that's flooding that basically happened. So we can use these remote sensing images with the different satellites to figure this out. Jason 3, it's owned by 4 different agencies. So NOAA and NASA are US agencies, and then the French Space Agency, CNES, and then the UNISTAT is the European organization. So they all work together to provide all the different information about how high the rivers and the reservoirs are. Excuse me. And when you tie that into GIS, you can use raster images that have a 3D measurement of depth, and that's how you figure out how much water that you need. So it's pretty cool. And we have the GRACE-FO, which is the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. This is with Germany and NASA, and it looks at groundwater using a couple different satellites. So they fly tandem about 137 miles apart, and they use microwaves to measure the distance between them and to go below the surface, obviously. So the more gravity there is, there'll be more groundwater, and so that's kind of how they test it and see it. And this is how the satellite tracks. Again, if you want to learn more about any of this specific remote sensing, here is the source at the bottom so you can check it out. There's still more. So we have the eco stress And that is the ecosystem what is it, spaceborne thermal radiometry experiment on the space station. So basically looks at the brightness temperatures of plants, and that's how we know how much evapotranspiration is. And so if you don't remember what evapotranspiration is, I want you to go back and look at the hydrologic cycle, and that's when plants evaporate basically water up into the air. They do that when there's a difference in the humidity between the outside and of the plant and the inside, and the pressure changes, and then it allows them to evapotranspirate. So when it's really dry and hot outside, they don't generally do that because they're trying to, conserve their water. But when it's really humid or warm or raining, obviously the pressure changes and it allows it to come out. Similar to the temperature change that causes maple syrup, you know, basically sap to float. That's based on temperature instead of humidity pressure. Okay, so eco-stress, we use this a lot. This is an example in Florida Bay. So they use it to check out the mud banks. It's like, who cares about mud banks? But there's a lot of critters and stuff that lives there. So you can see that there are cooler waters next to the basins in light blue. With the cool pictures of the coverage, they can use how the energy budgets work, as well as the evaporation basically from these mud banks. And it really helps determine how much seagrass will live or die along the shoreline. Seagrass is a really important ecosystem provider. We use it here in agriculture lands. This is a picture from California over 2022. It's from JPL, NASA. Basically, it's showing how much water is being used in each of these little squares versus the brown is the dry area condition. So this is the south end of Central California. There's a ton of agriculture here. Excuse me. Here's another cool index. This is farther south of the previous picture, just north of the Bight in California, and this talks about drought indication. And so you can use this, maybe looking at your own country, to see what drought stress there's going on, right? And this allows people to pay attention and decide, like, maybe what should we do? Should we change something? Should we, allocate resources in a different place? So this is called eco-stress. It's very, very cool to be able to see this. So as we know, drought impacts everybody, right? We have over 1 billion people that were affected just in the first 20 years of the 2000s. Africa tends to suffer from the most frequent droughts based on where they are, and a lot of them occur in East Africa. So the effect of this is it not only creates severe droughts, death, loss of food, etc., but it changes the GDP, or the gross domestic product. And so you'll see things like when Australia was in a drought and its ag productivity dropped by 18%. Every time California's in a drought, that causes a problem as well because it's one of the larger sources of agriculture in the US. As we know, water collection is pretty important, right? So in a lot of countries, collecting water is something that a lot of women do and girls. And so a lot of times they spend over 40% of their caloric intake just carrying water from the source to the home. So during the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of precipitation deficits recorded across South America. And, it's a big driver of the changes in crop yield, like, so how much crop you get, right? And so it creates volatility, meaning tons of up and down. And it causes a lot of financial losses. So you can see how the snowball effect can happen with the droughts. Ecosystem wise, we keep having more and more droughts. It's affecting more and more plants. We have an FAO. You can pull up the number of hectares of land lost each year. So we can see that we've lost over 12 million hectares of land. It eventually, turns into carbon sources, right? Instead of carbon sinks, if you think about it that way. So that's a change. And we get a lot of carbon offset if we have terrestrial ecosystems, meaning, plants, trees, etc. But they don't work very well and can't take in CO2 if they're all dried out. So that's what some of these papers are about. We also see um, an increase in surface temperature. So it's not just drying out, but the temperature of the ground is going up. And this we're seeing a lot changing. A lot of animals are dying off. A lot of plants are dying off. A lot of microorganisms are changing. And so it really, has a downturn in the biodiversity. Wetlands are a really important thing. Freshwater and saltwater. We're losing a lot of these because they're in drought-prone regions. They're critical for migratory species as well as a ton of other things. Australia and the U.S. have really similar ecosystems and they lost a lot of habitat in the last few years because of the huge drought. So a lot of this has to do with post-colonial history. If you remember, I said it's not always black and white, right, or very easy to answer. A lot of that has to do with how the landscape has been changed over time. But the effects now that we're seeing are being exacerbated by all the things that are happening. In the western U.S., mostly it's snowpack declining. We have really thirsty soil, and there's an increase in temperature, so there's a lot of evaporation. Here's an example of the snowpack in the western US, and you can see how the change is more negative than anything else from 1955 to 2020. And so, it's data, right? So it's really easy to find this. So I don't think anybody has the US, but a lot of times you can find things like this all across the world, depending on the data service that you're using. Here's an increase in temperatures. You can play these videos going on NOAA. Actually, this is part of Esri. You can zoom into any area that you want. You can go onto Esri and check out different heat events and whatnot. If you want to learn how to do that, just let me know. We can see that this map here shows the number of days over 95 degrees in 2025. And you can see there's a big increase from 1950 to 2025. So we have a much larger section of the world, of the US, that's dealing with a lot of heat. If you look, it goes from California and mostly like Texas and Oklahoma to California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and then all the southeastern states that are usually much more humid and not quite as hot. In 2098, it looks like it's going to be pretty gnarly, right? So this is what the futurecast is. So we have a lot of wildfires. We talked a little bit about this last week. You can look this up. It's called the Fire Information Resource Management System. It will show you. You can look at your country to see what the current global fires are. In real time. This is generally updated pretty often by NASA as long as the government is up and going, but it should be okay for right now. But you can check, the last 24 hours, the last 7 days. You can look at historical information. So this is another tool that you want to probably write down. As of October 10th in 2023, you can see the active fires that are going on. So quite a few, right, in those dry areas of the US that I just showed you, as well as the really dry areas across Europe, South America, Africa, looks like India, Egypt, Italy, lots of places that aren't used to tons of fires. So we can use MODIS, which is Aura, to check out, it's a NASA imagery system to look at the plume of ash that you can see from just like a volcano, right? So there's some really cool stuff you can see in here. Excuse me. Using all these different imagery. We also have NPP, which monitors in the southern hemisphere. So you can look and see these are where the satellite that you would use for the fires in Australia. In south central Chile, you can see these here, and you might wonder why is it green and red. Well, this has to do with an infrared lens that you use to look to see where the fire actually is. This spread really fast and destroyed a lot of homes. So this is a really good tool to use in real time when you're trying to help people. This is just the general frequency of wildfires across the globe between 2004 and 2018. This is something you can look up at ArcGIS. Here's the 15-year trend. Increasing is in yellow, where decreasing is in blue. So there is a different trend, as you notice, a lot more in Europe, across India, Russia, China. Then we have the Amazon ecoregion, which is really interesting, right? So we know this is where the big forests are, all the important, rainforest areas. Um, this is the Brazilian portion, which is the blue part on the inside. This is all taken from a story map in ArcGIS if you want to look it up. So there has been an uptick in fires, okay, based on a change in the conservation policy. This is where policies tie into ecology. This is the amount of wildfires based on the year that they were detected. And so the pinker colors is 2004, and then it gets to more yellow in 2019. So you can see there's quite the spread of more and more fire detected. If we use the Aqua satellite, this is how you would see 2.5 million points on the map, right? So using the Aqua satellite, you can see the number of fires. This is a temporal graph that you can also make in GIS. So this is showing the number of fires across years from 2005 to 2019 and the depth of the color, just like symbology. You can use this doing the data clock graphics in ArcGIS Pro. A lot of times people like, excuse me, like using things like this to show folks. Just depends on your audience whether or not somebody will be confused by something like this or they might understand it and appreciate it. You can also take your map and link your graphic to it. So these are ideas that I'm putting out there for you for your presentation. So in 2019, where, if you had a question, like where were there more fires common, right? And so the blue has fewer fires in the year of 2019 from 2005, I think it was. And then in the red, there's more fires. So you can see there's a change, like a shift going north, like up towards Venezuela, northern part of Brazil, Colombia, out towards the coast, out here in Peru. So you can see there is a shift. So if we look at the agricultural data set that we saw in an earlier lab, how does that line up with the fire, right? So we have forest lost in these red squares, and we have an increase in fire here. Interesting. Forest lost. It kind of looks like where the forest is lost is where there's not as many fires. So we're losing fire. What does that look like to you? You can also see a change, right? So you can see this total loss in hectares is much more here in the southern part of Brazil, down into Bolivia. And then going north is more, 2018, 2019. So kind of looks like, unfortunately, it's spreading a bit. In Africa, NASA has deemed this the fire content because it's home to like most of the fires in the world. It's kind of crazy and it's also very consistent. So that's part of where that gets that. Angola had almost 3 times the more fires than Brazil. They're open savannas, so it's really interesting. It's less about deforestation and more just about burns, burning down crops and whatnot. So there's another, way to look at this is that fire management is part of the ecosystem and it's part of the ecology. So I'm not sure if you know this or maybe you do, but a lot of drier places, there's a lot of seeds and a lot of crops that actually need to be burned in order for things to grow. So it's a little bit different than just burning down woodlands and big trees. It's actually helps them open. But there is also the burning down of trees to get other agriculture in there. So it's a mix. The hard part with the savanna fires is that they release a lot of CO2, but the grass regrows and sucks it back out of the atmosphere. So it is part of that ecosystem. So it's different than what we consider like a scary wildfire in a sense. In Southeast Asia, we're seeing a lot of vegetation fires, and these are really driven by the drought. Um, Most of these are human started. A lot of it has to do with slash and burn agriculture. And they're really used, excuse me, a lot for palm oil production. You have to clear the land to make that work. So here's a map of some fire frequencies using 10-minute grid intervals. So you can use, again, GIS to grab these. And it shows the cells having a fire every year during the years of 2003 to 2017. And so you can see the higher frequencies are really around Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia. Okay, but this is how you would use that data in a still map. So again, I talked a little bit about the ecosystem. A lot of times it has to be disturbed in order for it to come back properly. It does disrupt the soil, but sometimes it, initiates some of those geochemical cycles. The tricky part is successional fires, and there's a lot of different data out there depending on the ecosystem. So it'd be interesting for you to look that up and check it out and see what indigenous fire protection looked like compared to what current, maybe possibly post-colonial fire looks like. You also, obviously, fire releases a ton of greenhouse gases and a ton of pollutants. So grass fires are the least scary, really when it starts to burn bigger woodlands. The PM 2.5 gets out there. And then the super scary stuff is when it actually burns homes, buildings, and whatnot, because most of our furniture and things are made of tons of chemicals, and it's pretty gross. So what are some of our solutions? This is also something that you're going to want to talk about. So regenerating grasslands, also kelp forests and um, wetland grass, rotating crops to help rebalance the soil, and as far as where you cut down some of those trees, regenerative agriculture, regenerating the forest, and working on erosion control, as well as energy farming. So these are the things that are out there. So we have some really cool indigenous examples of this is the Inca hydrologic engineering. This is pretty cool how the water drains down and where it collects to be used. So you can check this out and use some more information about it. You'll want to look up some information on your own country. Like I said, I want you to look up indigenous practices on water, fire, where they lived, to make sure you can compare that to like post-colonization. Here's one from Peru. This is the different agricultural practices. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Gross noises. Okay, I think that's it for my slides, which is probably good. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll feel better and see you on Wednesday.